Ramana Maharshi was born Venkat Raman Iyer in 1879 in a small village in Tamil Nadu. An ordinary boy from an orthodox Brahmin family, unremarkable in every outward way, until one afternoon in 1896 when he was 16 years old, and something happened that he spent the rest of his life trying to point other people toward. He was sitting alone in his uncle's house when a sudden, overwhelming fear of death came over him. Not a thought about death, not a philosophical inquiry, a complete certainty that he was about to die, right now, in that room, on that afternoon. Instead of running from it, he lay down on the floor, made himself completely still, and asked a question. If the body dies, what is it that dies? What is the I that fears death? Where does it come from? What remains when everything that can be taken away is taken away? He lay on the floor of his uncle's house and followed that question all the way to its source. And what he found there, in the space behind all thought, behind all fear, behind the whole construction of what we call a self, was something that could not die because it had never been born. He called it the self. Not his self, the self. A few weeks later, he left home without a word of explanation, took a train to Tiruvannamalai, and walked straight to the great temple of Arunachala. The innermost sanctum of that temple, the holiest of holies, is strictly guarded and closed at certain hours. On the morning Ramana arrived, every gate was open. Not one priest in sight, no other visitors. He walked through each gate alone, all the way to the innermost sanctum, and stood before the Shivalinga. He did not speak. He simply stood there in complete absorption. His arrival entirely internal, entirely silent. Then he sat down and did not speak again for years. Not under a vow of silence, he had made no vow, but because he simply had no inclination to speak. He sat in the caves of Arunachala, unwashed, unmoving, occasionally bitten by ants and insects for months at a time, in a silence so complete that people began to come from the surrounding villages just to sit near him. They didn't know why they came. They simply found that sitting near him made something in them go quiet. As the years passed and his reputation grew, people came from across India and eventually from across the world. Scholars, seekers, philosophers, the curious and the desperate. All of them arriving with questions carefully prepared, rehearsed on the journey, ready to be asked. Something strange happened to many of them. They would sit down before him, this small, quiet man with extraordinary eyes, and the questions would begin to dissolve. Not because he answered them, because in his presence the questions lost their sense of urgency, their tightness, their insistence on being resolved. And the person asking them would find that what they had traveled so far to ask had somehow answered itself in the silence of simply sitting there. One evening, a group of devotees asked Ramana to explain the meaning of Shankara's great hymn in praise of Dakshinamurti, the form of Shiva who teaches in silence. They waited for his answer. He sat motionless. The silence deepened. The evening light moved across the walls of the hall. Still, he did not speak. Finally, one of them asked quietly, "Should we consider your silence as the reply to our question?" Ramana looked at them. "Yes," he said. "Silence is the true teaching. It is the perfect teaching. Silence is unceasing eloquence." I'm aware of the particular irony of telling this story on a podcast. This is episode 40 of The Long Thread. 40 episodes of words, stories, reflections, questions. And the milestone episode is about a man whose greatest teaching was that words obstruct the very thing they are trying to point at. Ramana himself understood this irony. He spoke when he had to, answering questions directly and clearly when words were the only tool available. But he always maintained that the silence was more eloquent than anything he could say. Silence is ever speaking, he said. It is the perennial flow of language. It is interrupted by speaking, for words obstruct this mute language. And yet here we are. And I think Ramana Maharshi would not have objected, because he also understood that most of us cannot yet hear the silence directly. We need the story first. Ramana spent 54 years at Arunachala without ever leaving. No travel, no lecture tours, no books written for fame, no organization built, no demand for belief. Just a man sitting quietly at the foot of a mountain, available to anyone who came, pointing everyone who arrived back toward the same question he had asked at 16 on the floor of his uncle's house. Who am I? Not as a philosophical puzzle to be solved, as a door to walk through. I'll leave you with one question today. Beneath all the noise of everything you are trying to figure out, what is still and has always been still, right at the center of you? This has been The Long Thread. Ancient stories for the present moment. If this story stayed with you, follow the long thread and wake up to a new one tomorrow.